Okay, so I got the Explorer behind me here. I'm standing in a little alcove because it's kind of windy out, so I just want to be able to talk to you guys. I'll hop in a sec and do the video from the inside, but I want to start out by saying a lot of these criticisms won't necessarily be about Ford, just about the Ford I bought. And I want to preface by saying it's run and drive great. We haven't had any running issues. These are all kind of just objective things about this car, specifically maybe some generalizations about Ford's quality control. I want to start out by showing you guys the exhaust, and then I'm going to hop in and go run through a couple other problems we'd had with it, and then talk about things like gas mileage, comfortability, stuff like that. Okay, so you can see somebody's hack job here on the exhaust. This is a vehicle that had been rear-ended, and somebody had to do a little piece together here. And what they chose to do, I don't know if the pipe got bent or what, but it looks like they just did the crappiest weld. Get to focus on there. It's only welded along the top. I think it's because the angle that they put the exhaust at, so when it gets moisture in it, it can run out, doesn't pull up. But maybe they just were lazy. I don't know, exhaust guys, you tell me what you think. But that looks like a pretty cheap job to me. Alright, I'm having a hell of a time actually finding a place to set the camera in here, so maybe that's a criticism. But I want to start out and tell you guys, this is a vehicle we picked up from a guy who does rebuilds on cars that have had accidents and they were totaled, but it's minimal damage or it's just cosmetic, because this thing was rear-ended. It needed a new tailgate, bumper, rear window, just a few things like that, and so it doesn't affect the running of the car at all. But we picked it up for a really good deal. It had 80,000 miles on it, and for the most part it seemed like a great deal, and it has been. But we've had some issues with it. First of all, we went on a we drove from here to the coast, which requires you to go over Willamette Pass to get to, I think it was when we were headed to Newport, or maybe when we were headed back from Newport. But going over the pass, it was a hot summer day, probably 90 degrees out, maybe a little cooler in the mountains. But it was an empty pass where we had to go about 35, 40 miles an hour uphill because it was very curvy, and it required a lot of shifting of transmission, stuff like that. But it was so bad to the point that the transmission was pluming. It was pluming white smoke. I pulled over, I thought maybe we were overheating, but on the dash it didn't show we were overheating. So I got underneath the car and I saw that the transmission fluid was coming down from on top of the bell housing down around the transmission onto the exhaust, and it was creating smoke. And I was very curious. I've talked to a couple transmission guys about it. I checked the fluid level, still good. They think that maybe whoever had the car before had serviced it and put too much transmission fluid in it. That caused when the volume increased as the transmission fluid got really hot, maybe the transmission was overheating. It caused it to, I don't know if it would boil over or if just the volume itself increasing would cause some spillover or something like that, but that's the issue we had with it. I don't have a lot of faith in these Ford transmissions. We've had to replace a lot of them before in some Crown Vics, F-150s. I think we had a Taurus or something, or an Escort back in the day that needed a new transmission. So these Ford transmissions we don't trust. And that's basically what I'm afraid of on this car. It runs and drives great. We keep synthetic oil in it, but the transmission is definitely the weak point, and I'm just waiting on more issues to come about with the transmission. Okay, so in this car there's dual climate control. I think that's what it's called. And that's where, when you have that third row, you have a little selection thing on the roof here that allows the people in the back seat to control basically these settings, but for the rear. And of course, the more features you add to a vehicle, the more things you create that can possibly break. And so there's a little selector in there, which the problem with this car is it's what switches from cold to hot, like on the HVAC system, or the heating and cooling system in the car, what switches it in between. And you can hear it, it's like a door, it swings open and closed. And so initially when we bought it in the summer, the guy didn't tell us about it, or maybe he didn't know it was a problem, so we always ran the AC. But then as soon as winter came around for the first time, we went to put it on hot, no hot air, only cold air, cold, cold, cold. So I got online, got in the forum, started looking stuff up, and I figured out that there's a little door in there that has to close to change from cold to hot, hot to cold. So what I did is I got in there and I put a manual switch. So you can pull on this zip tie right here and flip the door open or closed, depending on if you want hot or cold air. And I did that because in order to replace that little part, it's a narrow little skinny thing that's so jammed back there. I took all this off and tried to take a look at it, but I think you have to dismantle the actual dash framing, the supports, in order to actually get in there and replace it. And that's not something I want to do on a $3,000 car, so I'm just not going to bother with it. Overall, I don't find the seats to be comfortable at all in here. On road trips, this car always ends up hurting my lower back. I have problems with a lot of cars though, because I am about 6'3", and so if the seat's not just right, and if it doesn't put me in just the right position, it'll hurt my back. And if I sit up completely straight in here, as you can see, my head's hitting the roof, and that's with the seat really far back. So that's just an issue that I have to deal with a lot of cars, and that's my criticism here, not very comfortable. I have ridden in the back seat, but I always get car sick when I'm in the back, like especially in the back over those rear wheels. It's a lot bouncier. And so comfortability, if that's a real word, I give this thing a lower score because it's not the most comfortable SUV I've been in. Got the defrost on full blast for 5 minutes, and this is about as good as it gets. So I need to get a squeegee or some paper towels or something in order to drive in the snow. So that's one of the things I hate about this Explorer. I don't know if it's a problem with the blower inside the system back there or what. I mean, I can feel hot air coming out. It just doesn't really do a very good job, and it's not very much. Alright, you can see here that she runs cold. This is after driving 20 miles up here and then idling in the parking lot. It's still well below half. Sometimes on a real coldy day, like 20 degrees, if you got a big downhill coast, that thing will dip way down and you'll feel the heater go cold, which is weird. I might need to change out the thermostat sometime soon. I haven't really looked into it, but that's something that, as of right now, I don't like about this Explorer. Alright, and the last thing I want to talk to you guys about that I hate about this car is actually the gas mileage. And I know you'll say, oh, I'm an idiot because it's an SUV and SUVs get bad mileage. Well, the thing is, I'm pretty sure if this had the V8 in it, we would get better mileage. And so what I don't like is this crappy 4-liter Ford V6 just burns up the gas. You know, idling